Okay, wrapping up this third lecture of the history of money, I'm going to take a look at the early Iron Age. Now, between the late Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, there was what historians have called the early Bronze Age collapse, and it was this period of a couple centuries where, and again, there's some mystery here about exactly what went on, but it was violent. It was very disruptive, and it interrupted all these extensive trade routes in that ancient world, and you saw reduced literacy, reduced arts, reduced sciences. So it's somewhat of a dark age. Well, the Iron Age begins to settle. The early part of the Iron Age begins to settle in the early part of the first millennium BC, and it's called the Iron Age, of course, because of the prevalent use of iron. And iron, iron had begun to be extracted from ore in the second millennium. In fact, there was some use of wrought iron or worked iron in the latter part of the second millennium BC, but bronze predominated, and it wasn't until around 1000 BC that iron really began to burst forward. And of course, iron was extremely valuable for the making of tools, weapons. During this period, again, we see sort of almost a Renaissance period of new centralized empires, further development of the written language. Some of the empires we see in Mesopotamia, the Assyrian Empire, that's capital in Nineveh. You see there, their territory extended into Egypt. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, centered here in Babylon, replaced the Assyrian Empire, characterized by use of chariots, a flourishing urban life, as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the old wonders of the world, Ishtar Gate, great progress in the arts and sciences. These were also very, very brutal societies. The Assyrians in particular were known for their brutality. Slavery, of course, just extremely widespread in all of these empires. But for our purposes in this class, again, we see a continuation of that old ancient system. Gold and silver bullion in the form of objects, sheets of gold and silver, nuggets of gold and silver, rings, bars, jewelry, as you see pictured here. These are some ancient Neo-Babylonian artifacts, gold artifacts. So from this Neo-Babylonian period, here are some more gold artifacts. And obviously these were used as items of trade, of value, a store of value. In this early Iron Age, the old units of measurement persisted. Shekel, mina, talent. You can see why the shekel is such an important unit of measurement in this ancient world. In ancient Israel, around the time of David and Solomon, the shekel was also the primary unit of account. And under Solomon, Israel became a extremely prosperous kingdom. And if you look at the first temple, the way it's described, of course it was later destroyed by the Babylonians, but on the inside just filled with gold. Gold, gold, gold. Solomon had accrued immense wealth. And in fact, this is a scene of Solomon in his palace. Solomon was said to have had a revenue of 666 talents of gold every year, roughly speaking. That amounts to 80 tons of gold revenue every year at that peak, that golden age of Solomon's empire there in Israel. Another civilization in the early Iron Age, Phoenicia. The Phoenicians, their home base was in what today is the coast by eastern Mediterranean coast by Lebanon. And the Phoenicians were a maritime civilization, established bases all across the Mediterranean Sea and dominated trade across the Mediterranean Sea. Of course, the Phoenicians invented the phonetic alphabet. We have them to thank for that. Consisted of politically independent city-states. So this was not the centralized empire that you saw elsewhere. Innovative shipping technology, but they too use gold and silver money. And they obtained their silver from the Iberian Peninsula and from their key trading base in the Mediterranean, Sardinia. Plato, in the early 5th century BC, later commented that the Phoenicians had a love of money, and that they did. So that rounds it off. Oh, here's some Phoenician jewelry. Still no coins. The Greeks were heavily influenced by the Phoenicians, by the way. It will be the Greeks who have the first coins. We're not quite there yet. Almost. Some more Phoenician silver and gold. So, the conclusion for this lecture 3. Ancient currency. What do you need to take away from it? Before the 7th century BC, in ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean, what do we find? This mixture of grain, currency, silver and gold, uncoined silver and gold. Money is traded by weight, not by unit of account. And that primary unit, except for Egypt, was the shekel. By the way, the Phoenicians also used the shekel. So it was only in Egypt where the unit of measurement was different, but money traded by weight. Granaries and temples acted as proto-banks, lending out money and grain and accepting it for deposit. So again, from our perspective, this seems like a very simple, even primitive system. But if you stop to think about it, for the time, I would argue that this is quite a sophisticated system. And if you look at those early empires from this period, I mean, really impressive what they were able to achieve and to accomplish. And this money, this ancient currency, was a big part of that, allowing for division of labor and allowing for a flourishing economic system and trade system. So that is all. Until next time, I hope you are well, and see you for lecture 4.